We could see the moon and the sun, 'cause we'd stay up. We'd stay up, yes, stay up. No overthinking, our world was spinning. We had the time of our lives. Now we're looking back to the days we wanted all. Yes, we were jumping in blind, free to fall. Time and space was not between us, shifting our lives into shapes that we wanted to see.
Welcome to our holiday edition of Music for Good. In this episode, we're joined by acclaimed and award-winning recording artist, songwriter, and vocal producer, Dahlia Fernandes. Listen in as she shares her insights and wide cultural experiences of having lived and made music all across the world. I'm your host, Rajesh. Dahlia, welcome to this special Christmas Day edition of Music for Good.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
So you're joining us from Trinidad, is that right, Dahlia?
Yes. So as it happens, during COVID, we had just come back from LA and we got here, and I was going to make a visit back to Toronto where I live. And no, fate would not have that, and got locked down here for COVID, and it's still not open. The airbase is not open. So should I leave? I don't think I'd come back to be able to be with my husband. So this is my current situation. And I can't complain because it is snowing in Canada and it is bright and beautiful and sunny. So it's clear that that's what was meant to be for my Christmas.
Oh, that's fantastic. So is Trinidad home now for you, you think? Or is that something that's still, that you're figuring out?
I feel like when you're not married and you're not, you're just a single person, home can be different things. It can be where your family is, it can be where your parents are, and your closest people in your life are, the majority, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like home is where my husband is. So we were in the UK for 3 months last year at this time, and that felt like home. We made it our home. We had this place that we lived in London, and doing our art, and then we went to LA for a month in Feb, and that felt like home. So we were always together in that time. So I feel like home is where that connection happens. But that is such a tricky question, like some people feel like India might be home because that's where I grew up, or some people might feel like Dubai is their home if they moved there, which is what happened in my case. And then we've been in Canada for like 23 years, so that feels like home. And like my parents, my family, all of my aunts, my uncles, majority of them live in Canada, right? So
right.
Yeah, I would say maybe, and now hearing myself out loud, it sounds like the latter, which is I'm figuring it out.
Yeah.
But I know that sense of peace comes when I'm connected to myself and without the angst of being away from my spouse, of course, right?
Right. Now, your spouse, Nikolai, he is from Trinidad and
Yes.
phenomenal artist in himself. We hope to have him on the show, at some point in time. It's just a thought that came up as I was talking to you. But Trinidad is where he grew up, and that's home for him, right?
Yes.
You want to just maybe give our listeners just a little, just a flavor of what Trinidad is like. Could you paint a picture with your words, just so that we could all kind of be there with you guys right now?
It's very incredible to be here because, number one, I'm coming in as an outsider into a new culture, right? But I have the luxury, really, I tell people it's a luxury to see Trinidad through my husband Nikolai's eyes, because the people I would hang out with with people that he has now made, strong bonds with. So I am meeting people through him, people that he's, let's say, vetted already for years, right? So, versus going to a new country and like figuring out, oh, this could be a cool person to hang out with, and then they never call you back. Like that starting from scratch feeling isn't entirely there.
Okay, that's
And
relief, I'm
then,
sure.
yeah, and then aesthetically, it looks like Goa. So every time I post any pictures of the beaches or the palm trees or the roads, some parts look like Bombay too. Or Mumbai. Yeah, I still have to adjust to saying Mumbai. And some parts look like Dubai. It was like a mix. But every time I post something, if people who are either from Goa or have been to Goa say, it looks so much like this place, like something specific. Oh, it looks like Kandali Beach or something like that,
Right.
So I think that's pretty interesting and trippy, right? And and it's being Indian and being in a country where close to half of the population is Indian. It's like a second trip now, right?
Yeah.
It's a second layer of seeing Indian culture through a Caribbean lens, right? Through their interpretation, through their kind of this hybrid culture where there's a dominant African culture, but there's an Indian culture, and how it comes together, and how not, what would be considered appropriation is not. So you could be Indian and wear African garb, and no one's going to say, well, who do you think you are? And you have Diwali commercials where someone could be African and in a complete langa and jewelry and makeup and the accessories, and it's not considered appropriation because that is the culture. It is the culture.
That sounds
right?
like a
So
good blend. If, just kind
it is incredible. It's incredible. I'm still absorbing and taking it all in and trying to figure out what it is. And you and I have had separate conversations about what it's like to be a third culture kid, right? So that's an entire story in itself.
I totally agree. I totally agree.
Mhm.
And you mentioned Goa, and so you have Goan heritage, as I know, and maybe so you want to talk a little bit to that.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you're asking me this question now, because I've been digging deeper, stylistically, culturally, identity, to figure out, before I sing any song, before I sing a single note, before I compose a note and string of notes together, who am I? Before the world asks me who I am culturally, right? Obviously, I'm always asking myself who I am otherwise. But just in terms of this cultural identity, and you think of Goa, and I've been doing a lot of research in the last, let's say, month or so, even deeper than I usually do, as I'm working with a stylist over here. And just like, how do we show up in the physical, right? And we started looking into some famous designers from Goa, and looking into Goa itself, right? And my dad's experience of Goa and what has been passed on to me. And this is very interesting what occurred to me. My dad was 40 when the Portuguese left Goa. Or sorry, was 40 when Goa became an official state of India.
Right.
I'm not even 40. Right? So his understanding of what he gave to me was his understanding of where he fits culturally. So now he's told, now you're Indian, and you figure out how to tell your kids that as well. But he wasn't told that. That's not his experience. That's like migrating somewhere, someone taking over a country and saying, okay, well, now keep telling your children you're this from now on. So there's this ambiguity that has always kind of followed me everywhere.
Mhm.
And I finally come to peace with that.
When you came to India on your tour, that was the first time you came to India as musically for music, and as part of your
Yes.
career as a musician, that was the first time you actually came over. And what was that experience like for you? Was it everything you expected, or was it?
Oh, it was more. It was more. It was like so you and I were discussing the tour for months prior, and I remember crazy calls, like just like the time conversion was insane, if you remember.
Yes, I do.
And you and I would just try to make these little windows happen. I'm like, 5 a.m. Yes, 5 a.m. it is, like in Canada, calling you. That's what we have. And we just kept going and tried to make it happen and we just kept, calling who we needed to call and to make it come together. And so your question, was it everything you expect? I wasn't even thinking about the expectations. All I was thinking was practice your stuff inside out, be ready for the tour, musically, the actual act, and do whatever you can to hit as many cities as possible and make the scheduling work, right? So traveling up and down the country. So the expectation, I would, once I got there, once I got to the gate to get to go on tour, and I'm looking at Nikolai, um, and we weren't married then, right? He proposed when I got back, actually. So I'm just looking, I'm like, I just started crying at the gate. I was like, okay, I can now stop. Like, this is actually happening. Because we were just even a few days before,
I
we had
remember.
added more gigs to the tour,
I
right?
remember.
There was gigs added while I was on tour, if you
Yes.
remember. So
Yes.
it was insane. And so now you're just, okay, there's this patriotic part of myself that gets super emotional whenever I land in India. Is this feeling of like, these are my people. This is where I grew up. The smells and the sounds and there's like, I don't know, how that sort of like almost Bollywood version of patriotism, like the soundtrack to go with it, these epic like Chennai playing and stuff, in my head.
Yes.
Maybe I'll tell the story of how we got introduced really quickly at this point then. Might as well, right?
Yeah, why not?
So the quickest way of telling this story is that a friend that I grew up with, who I consider a brother, Bharat Suri, was moved back to India, and we grew up in Dubai together. And he was on a plane with you, happened to
Yes.
be on the same flight as you. The first day the two of you met because your admin, your assistant, booked you accidentally in a middle aisle seat. This story makes you sound so snobby, but when in fact you are the most down to earth person
Well,
I've ever met.
I have my snobby
I
parts,
need
so
my middle.
I'll admit
Yeah, it's like,
it.
no middle aisle for me. No, thank you. How could you do such a thing? Like, I'm imagining the poor woman getting fired over this, but such is not the case. And
Yeah,
you
Bharat was
came
looking at me
to,
like, "Who are you? Why
who
are you
are
giving
you?
your assistant such grief?" Okay, so what if you got a middle C? It was very funny, actually.
But you started such an awesome friendship with Bart, and then that got extended to me. And we've done so many cool projects since then. And I'm really excited for what you're doing and about to do further with Music for Good. So I'm like really excited to be here and connect with you in this way as well, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, it's been an amazing journey for us, and funnily enough, it was literally one of my last plane trips back as I was leaving corporate life, so that I could extend uh, myself in other areas that I was interested in, music included.
Really?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
never knew that.
yeah.
I
So
did not know
it was
that.
literally, I
Oh,
think,
wow.
one of my last flights, working with large corporations that I'd done for much of my life, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was quite interesting that that conversation with Bharat, ended up
Mm-hmm.
making the connection between the Bombay Jazz Club, yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
therefore that that India tour. So, you have been working on a new project, haven't you, recently? And
Yes.
I know that because, we're trying to see, trying to work on some stuff together. But um,
Mm-hmm.
between what you can share about this project and
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that you want our listeners to know a little more about it.
Yes, absolutely. So it's great timing you asking me the question, of course, because I have um, a very clear sense of clarity on the project, especially in the last few weeks. So I was trying to put out a full album. We have enough material for that. We're sitting on a lot of songs. But what we're going to do is actually just put out an EP. That's our current plan, to put out an EP with about 5 songs on it, and then drop the full album. So I have taken a hiatus for many different reasons for the last few years, trying to figure out, a lot of things. But in that time, I never stopped writing. So I'm now sitting like, I think I wrote like 50 or 60 songs in the last few years, if not more. And that's just for myself. There's others that I write for other people, so
Yes,
I end up
yes.
selling a lot of my material as well. But in the meantime, it's just the catalog kept increasing, and so now we have this hard task of um, whittling it down to the few that are the best, the gold, right? So I keep sending you a few songs every every few weeks, but that's because when it happens fast. In my case, that's what I find is when that creativity and inspiration hits, boom. In terms of the project, it is a slight departure from my previous record, production wise, and sort of the sound, really. But my voice is my voice, and will always still be my voice. So it's still always undeniably Dahlia. That was my promise, right? And then, but it's interesting because I feel more expressed in the current soundscape, which, oh man, how do we even describe this? It's sort of, some songs kind of have a hip hop kind of kick and treatment, and then you have some things that are sort of like, Billie Eilish meets Amy Winehouse kind of thing, where it's like still jazzy in my approach to the vocals, but it's being produced in a stark pop sort of blanket.
Our podcast is called Music for Good, and we've been asking all our guests, many of them who as part of what they do in their work, in their music, have some inspiring stories. Do you think you have a story that you can share with us that is in that vein or in that light?
I'm thinking there's a few projects that are coming to mind, but the one that stands out would be a project that I did for the UN, and I was had the opportunity to be called by a producer named Roy Hamilton III that I've done a lot of writing with, and he was in Toronto when the Global Change Initiative was going to be held in Toronto a few years ago. I think it was 2015 or 2016, and so he called all the sort of like young musicians together and to make a record for global change. And some of the topics that were part of the change initiative by the UN was sustainability, climate change, and wanting it to come from a youth's perspective as well, wanting to get
Right.
people working on the ground level, the people who this planet needs to be left to maintain, right? So it was awesome. There was like, how many of us, like 7 or 8 writers on this song, and we got to sing it at City Hall, with all these UN dignitaries from all over the world. So that was kind of cool. And just being so deliberate and conscious of your writing when it's commissioned, right,
Yeah.
is an awesome opportunity. But generally, Rajesh, I would say I try to be mindful of the message in my songs, right? And this idea of music for good, and just being careful, like, what am I really saying here? Am I adding to the noise? What is the message? You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that go on social media, for example. They're not actively doing anything. They're just adding to the hate and the anger. And there's many times we need angry songs to feel expressed. But how is that? How is that executed in the actual song is something that's important for me.
Is there any other sort of insights that you might want to share on the social media part of this whole
Oh,
game?
that's a
I
huge,
call that?
yeah, that's a huge question. Yeah, that's a huge question, especially for artists. That's a huge question because um, I'll admit I've been overwhelmed. You know, you go through these cycles where you're like, I want to share. And then you go through a cycle where I don't want to share, which is human. But the algorithm doesn't like that. It doesn't like when you say, I want time for myself and I don't want to share. And it is highly intuitive and ever changing. So I feel for artists. I think it's very easy to say, oh, don't care about the algorithm, just make music. And, you know, it's easy to say that. But when if you don't get into a music festival you really want, and because they said, well, you just don't have the followers, right? The first thing they're looking at when I send in a grant application is, the first question is, what are your numbers for the following platforms? Instagram, YouTube, you know what? So I'm being graded. I'm getting opportunities based on that metric. So I don't think you can just tell an artist, don't care. What I would say is, don't care when you're creating. When you're creating, just stay authentic. And I really believe that authenticity will always go the furthest. Everyone, even people, no matter what you're singing about, it's full of that authenticity. Beyonce is being authentic. Nicki Minaj is being authentic, right? In that what they want to put out. And however, you know, some artists can put out pretty convoluted messages and it can be not the greatest for our youth. They're still being authentic and it's still reaching. So it's then our call whether what kind of, you know, content you want to put out and how do you want to be represented and what do you want to do for the next generation and the next generation after that. And my advice to artists that ask me, Dahlia, like, how do I handle this? Because it's a lot for me to take on. You know, I'm trying to be creative and I'm trying to also be a social media expert. And what am I saying? And why am I putting this post up? Is it just to promote myself? Like, what am I doing? Is this even artistic? You know,
Yeah.
why am I telling people what I'm eating? And it's confusing. It's confusing because people want to feel connected, but it's how much do you want to share? So here's what I found. I found that I tell artists to find their voice and their authentic voice within the medium, right? So when you do go on Instagram Live or if you're making a video or a photo, just be honest, whether it be in what you're capturing, what is the picture, or the caption. Make the caption in your voice. How do you speak? You know, do you speak poetically? Then speak poetically. And it's going to feel genuine. And it always comes back to the art. It always comes back to a good song is a good song, is a great song, is a great song, is a great song, is a great song. You know, that will always penetrate past the social media.
Tell us, Dahlia, what does Christmas mean for you? I mean, this is special. Our listeners are going to be listening to this on Christmas Day in a year that's been unprecedented, very difficult,
Yeah,
but
very difficult.
as much as it's been a curse, you might even see that there is a silver lining and that it's possibly been also a blessing for many to be able to,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to connect with their families, to spend more time. to introspect. And
Oh yeah,
various,
introspection is definitely something that the entire
various
planet was given, whether they wanted it or not. We,
maybe the
yeah,
planet needed it.
yeah.
But what is Christmas for you? What does it mean to you? And what will you be doing this Christmas?
Um, well, you're definitely the first person that's ever asked me that, I think. When you ask the question, on this side of the phone, I have this enormous smile, like gigantic smile on this side, because I immediately thought of what it was like growing up in a huge family and um, everyone looking forward to Christmas Day. And I don't know if this was the experience for everyone, but we had quite a unique experience coming from a family of entertainers and musicians. So all the kids growing up, every year we would practice. We basically did a show for the adults, and sometimes the adults had things planned too, and like songs that they had practiced. So my aunt would do a song that she's been working on, and the kids would have like dance choreography ready for some songs, and sing, dance, whatever. Like it was just a whole thing. What are you doing for Christmas? Like, what are you gonna perform? And just the gifts and getting the house ready, and having these a set of Jim Reams Christmas carols that my dad always played. And this year in Trinidad, I was like, one of the things I'm supposed to do today on my list of things to do is actually make that playlist for my Trini family and play all the stuff like my dad would play, right? So having that ready for our Christmas family luncheon this week. And then the unique experience, going back to your first question about being Goan, is the sweets, right? So that was like a huge part of like Goan culture. So you have these little kalkals, and we have neuros and all these amazing sweets made with coconut and sugar and all this stuff. That it's not about the sweet. It was about getting together with your mom and your aunts and making it together. So all of those memories come together now, and I try to make it happen as an adult for my own family.
Dahlia, thanks so much for sharing all your amazing experiences with us, our listeners, your listeners. And we want to wish you, Nikolai, your family in Trinidad, your family in Dubai, Toronto, all your friends, loved ones, a very Merry Christmas. And thank you once again for being with us on Music for Good.
Wish you the same, and thank you so much for having me. That was a really fun conversation.
With no fear at all. We are looking back to those days. We wanted more and more and more. We were jumping and falling in line, free from it all. Time and space was not between us, making our world into places we wanted to be. Now we're looking back to those days. We want it all. We were jumping in line, free to fall. Time and space was not right between us, shifting our lives into shapes we wanted to see. I remember dreaming and feeling we'd make it.